The favorites prevailed on both sides of the border, but we will tell you about the exceptions to the rule. This is Krown Gridiron Nation on TSN. Welcome, everybody, to the Hubcast studio in Vancouver. I'm Jim Mullen. That's Gord Randall over there, and Mike Hogan will join us from TSN in Toronto. But first, let's get right into our 2-minute offense. Ohio Pitt. Okay, was not good enough for Ohio this afternoon. Rourke went 15 of 27 for 177, but that rebuilt offensive line in front of him didn't hold up all that well. The Yukon Huskies replaced Regina-born Mike Beaudry at quarterback with Jack Zergiotis. He's born in Montreal. He did throw for 275, but he served up 2 picks in Yukon's loss to Illinois, while Uglock with 2 tackles and a sack. Virginia over William and Mary by a bunch. Terrell Jana from Vancouver, 3 receptions for 35 yards. Dejon Brissett yet to launch. Number 4, Oklahoma serving up burgers, 70 burgers on South Dakota, 70-14. Neville Gallimore with a tackle for a loss and a forced fumble. Minnesota, Fresno State, those Golden Gophers in overtime. Benjamin St-Juste, the transfer from Michigan, gets some action with 3 tackles. North Carolina over the U, 28-25. Miracle Mac Brown and his Tar Heels. Well, Patrice Rene from Ottawa was in the middle of it all with 5 tackles. Hey, Nevada, Duck, the Garish Green grilling up more burgers. It's another 70-burger. Javon Holland for the Ducks with the punt return, 4 tackles and a TFL. Maybe the only time Volunteer fans feel happy these days is watching a Nationwide commercial with Peyton Manning. Their team isn't making them happy. A loss to BYU in double overtime, but at least Josh Palmer contributed with 4 catches for 56 yards. Buffalo, not the sacrificial lambs in Penn State, at least in the first half. Julian Bourassa with this TD reception, but then the Penn State trio took over. Sutherland with 3 tackles and half a TFL. Lukita with 2 tackles, and Daniel Joseph from his defensive tackle position with 2 tackles and half a TFL. Chuba Hubbard, coming off a 219-yard rushing day, only got 8 touches, 44 yards and a touchdown before he got to rest. Oklahoma State by a bunch over McNeese. We'll talk about Ogbongbemiga in a moment. So, Gord, let's go to you first. What are your positives and negatives from week 2?
Well, the clear big positive as far as Canadian content is concerned, Oklahoma took care of business as per usual, but it's in North Carolina where the Tar Heels are off to a 2-0 start. They've already matched their win total from last year under new coach Mac Brown, and Patrice Rene, the Canadian, really stepped up this week. On the negative side, things are starting to get ugly fast in Knoxville for the Tennessee Volunteers, and despite Josh Palmer having a decent performance, they dropped to 0-2 at home versus BYU. And then in a matchup of 2 Canadian teams, we had a pretty good matchup in a close game between Illinois and Yukon, with Illinois coming out on top. Sidney Brown on the Illini roster there. So a couple interesting matchups, but largely status quo, as you said.
I just was reminded in week 2 how much I hate blowouts. I mean, I don't want to see Clemson beat Jim Mullen A&M 82-7. I don't want to see Alabama beat the Ramblin' Wreck from Gord Randall Tech by 53-3. In the OUA, we dealt with this 5 years ago, having to cover games like this, and I looked it up. In the first half of the season 5 years ago, 47% of all of the games in the conference were decided by 40 or more points. I thank God that Texas played LSU, so at least we got 2 of the top teams playing one another instead of some of these ridiculous cookie schedule games at the first part of the season.
Okay, enough with the games. What about our top performances by Canadians in the NCAA? Of course, it's time for our Stateside 5. Number 5, new to the list, Sam Emilus. The UMass wideout from Vanier College was second in the receiving corps with 3 receptions for 50 yards. In at 4, Josh Palmer. The Vols are well on their way to another miserable season in Rocky Top, but Palmer is not the reason. 4 catches for 56 yards in the double OT loss to BYU. In at 3, here's a surprise. Ryson John from Simon Fraser. The Vancouver College grad led the Clan through the first half with a solid effort against Portland State before the walls caved in. Number 2, here he is again, Oklahoma's Neville Gallimore, the DT who consistently draws the double team. He still forced the fumble, TFL'd, along with 3 sacks in half a game. Total freak. And number 1, Eamon Ogbongbemiga. This is the dominant guy from Alberta from OK State this week. 7 tackles. Yes, McNeese State, you've been Ogbong. Okay, Mike, do you like who's on the board, or are you going to go off the board with your favorite this week?
Well, I do like who's on the board, but I am going to go off the board for somebody else, and I'm going to go with Dante Brown from Fort Hays State University in the Mid-American Conference. He's a kicker. He was the conference's best special teams player of the year a year ago. 3 for 3 kicking field goals, including a career best 51. 3 for 3 with extra points as well. And in his kickoffs, 4 of 7 went for touchbacks. So a senior from Mississauga, Ontario, Dante Brown is my player of the week.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Fort Hays State is where Canadian Nathan Shepard starred before the New York Jets drafted him, and he looks like a great player for them. But my favorite is, despite the fact he's only playing Div 2 ball, is Rice and John of the Simon Fraser clan. They went down to Portland State, and the final score looked pretty lopsided, 70-7. But in the first half, they played them to 21-7 at the half and actually scored first. And Rice and John, who stands 6'6" and was an all-GNAC performer last year, looks primed for a breakout season for them and is starting to get NFL draft attention. He went well over the 100-yard mark and the Clan's lone touchdown on the day. That's a standout performance against a top-notch opponent for them.
When we come back, we will check out what happened in the week of U Sports. You are watching Krown Gridiron Nation on TSN.
In British Columbia's Similkameen Valley, our partner Sunny Dhaliwal and his family grow and pack some of the finest fruit you will ever taste. Thank you, Sunny, for making Krown produce fresh at its best.
Welcome back to the Hubcast studio in Vancouver, everyone. Let's check through what happened in the Great White North of football in our 3-minute warning. Calgary, Manitoba, 6,100 on hand at McMahon Stadium. All 24 points for the Dinos in the first half as Dallas Boat was on fire. 2 TD receptions. Manitoba never found the end zone. Regina, Alberta. Regina's Josh Donnelly threw for 340, but the Rams went flat in the second half. Jonathan Rosary on this 14-yard run clinches things for those Golden Bears. UBC out of gas on a country road in the middle of Saskatchewan. This one was tied at 7 at one point, and then Saskatchewan hit the accelerator, 40-7. Your final. Defense really not an option with Waterloo and Windsor Lake going. This run by Trey Ford set up a 23-yarder from Zaglinski, puts it up and through the uprights, and Waterloo sneaks out with the W. Laurier, Toronto, yeah, this is your upset special. Clay Sakara, 328, 4 TDs, including this 57-yard game winner to Nolan Lovegrove, and they steal one on the road, those U of T varsity Blues. Mac and Western, yes, the Marauders did stay close to the defending Yates Cup champions. S.A. Maboko on a 34-yard receiving end from Andreas Duick, ties it up at 17. Chris Merchant takes over in the second half, runs it in from 2 out, and then some trickery as Merchant catches this one in the end zone from Brett Ellerman from 5 out. They break the back of Matt. Laval visits Concordia, and we've seen this play out before. A big blowout for the Rouge or Vincent Breton Robert with 134 on the ground and a tutty. Well, after that trip across the nation, what do we know?
Well, for starters, I think the OUA is in the pole position, looking like the most exciting conference in the country this year. But what we know is that it looks like there's a very clear lead dog in all 4 conferences. Acadia looks like they're going to roll through the AUS. Laval has yet to be challenged, though they might be this upcoming week. In the OUA and the Cam West, Western and Calgary both made very clear that the Johnny-come-latelys in that conference were not up to their level yet. And Mike, the Greg Marshall, took care of business this week, but so did that Greg Marshall, that other Greg Marshall.
It might be a bigger win for that Greg Marshall because I don't know how many people expected U of T to go into Laurier and win, but that's exactly what they did. And it's interesting seeing the 2 Greg Marshalls because right now at Western, we know the Greg Marshall's job is, and that's not to rebuild, but to reload. There's pressure to win now, and they've been doing that for the last handful of years, certainly in the OUA. With that Greg Marshall, it's more of a rebuild. He's rebuilt his coaching staff, and this team that I don't think anybody gave a hope in Hades of making the playoffs this year has scored 122 points in 3 games. They've beaten 2 teams that are expected, or at least competed with 2 teams that are expected to be playoff teams in Waterloo and Laurier, and blew out Windsor. So they're 2 Greg Marshalls. They both have different jobs, but both had pretty good weekends.
Well, there may not have been many people expecting Toronto to win that game, but this guy was one of them. And I must say that Clay Sakara has a sizable early lead in the Het Crichton race right now.
Now, speaking of great coaches, maybe the greatest coach, at least numbers-wise, in amateur football in Canada doesn't reside in U Sports. He resides in the CJFL. Tom Sargent, the head coach of the Saskatoon Hilltops, and he joins us now from CTV in Saskatoon. Tom, you got your 200th win over a week ago. Does that make you feel bolder or older?
Oh, there's no question. It makes me older. I'm telling you, it's been certainly a long journey. It's been an unbelievable journey, and certainly first my family, my wife Chris, and children Macy and Abby have just been phenomenal through the whole process. And to work for such a great organization like the Hilltops has been a dream come true. And ultimately to have such a loyal, dedicated coaching staff. And hey, I'm blessed to get to coach the Saskatchewan kid, and obviously we've done a pretty good job leading them the right way. But hey, lots to do, lots on the horizon, and lots to gun for. So can't wait to keep moving this thing forward.
Well, Tom, one of the things that occurred to me when I was touring the Saskatoon Hilltops facility is that you're a community with huge shoulders. That facility would be in the top 1/4 of U Sports facilities that you guys have just constructed. What is it like to be in a community that is so on board with your operation?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of pride. Within the Saskatoon Hilltops, formed in 1947, it was set right. We got so many business leaders, community people that, they've all been touched or blessed through being connected or a part of the Hilltops. And so many Hilltops have gone on to become, great leaders in our community and ambassadors and you name it. So, the facility that we're blessed to have now for our players is absolutely, we believe, is second to none. We're blessed to be a part of that great facility that so many put their hands into, make a big difference for 85 to 90 players each and every year.
Coach, not all CJFL organizations out there are as solid as yours. I think that almost goes without saying. But do you think the CJFL needs a major rethink in how it approaches its product and how it operates? Or do you think that you've actually created a really good model for all CJFL teams to follow?
Well, I'm always a believer that you can always get better. So for sure, we always got to keep it, evaluate and figure out how we can create different and better blueprints. Ultimately at the end of the day, we get measured by wins and losses. So obviously my coaching staff seems to do that better than most. And ultimately it's about making sure you get good coaches to lead your players, finding good players to run your systems and take it from there. And, I guess what we see is, hey, year in, year out in the CGFL, there's, I'd say there's 5 to 7 teams that, have a legit shot to get where they go. We win a lot of close games. People don't respect or understand that at times. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you want more players playing the game of football. CJFL provides that opportunity. We got lots of blue chips. We got a lot of players with chips on their shoulders. And ultimately, if you do it right, you're going to find yourself in good games doing what you need to do and hopefully going where you want to go.
Our thanks to Tom Sargent, he of the 200-plus wins as the head coach of the Saskatoon Hilltops as they move forward, closing in on a 6th straight CJFL championship. Coming up, it's our preview of next week's games on both sides of the border. Stick around. Courtesy of Canada Football Chat, here are your top high school teams in the home and native land. Well, we had the 2-minute offense, the 3-minute warning. We got a lot of numbers in this show. These are 4 games to watch coming up next week. Let's start with the guys that wear baby blue. North Carolina are the comeback kids. Ottawa senior defensive back Patrice Rene now into the mix. 5 tackles for the Tar Heels in the win over the U. These guys are a team to watch, Gord.
Yeah, they are. They've opened the season with a win over an SEC opponent in South Carolina and now a win over an ACC opponent, matching both their conference win total and overall win total from last year. And look, guys, this was much better than a 2-win team last year talent-wise, and they just had a really rough season. But the return of the Mac Brown, is off to a great start in Chapel Hill, and Patrice Rene looked really strong as a leader in that secondary. So this Wake Forest game will be interesting to see if they can keep the momentum going, as if they are going to be a serious contender in the ACC, this should be a W for them.
Let's go to a border state that loves to recruit Canadians, North Dakota. Last year, them Fighting Hawks went to number 5 Sam Houston, and they scored a huge upset. They were led by Brady Oliveira at running back. He's now with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Can holdovers Mason Bennett and Windsor's Quinton Seguin pull off the repeat, Mike?
No, it doesn't look like it. I mean, Sam Houston State rolled last week. It was 77-0. When the game was 2 minutes old, it was 21-0. 366 rushing yards against -6 rushing yards. So you mentioned the two Canadians. I was going to highlight and why we're talking about this game in the first place. You know, they got blown out last week by North Dakota State. They blew out Drake the week before. I talked off the top of the show how much I hate blowouts. These two teams have just provided those kind of blowouts. So could North Dakota do it again? Maybe, but it doesn't look good.
Southeastern Louisiana at Ole Miss. Defensive end Isaac Berglund finally gets some action for Southeastern. Calgary at UBC. Many of you will remember a beatdown in 2014 when Calgary came to town at homecoming. It was really the last stand for then coach Sean Olsen. Blake Nill made the move later that year in December over to UBC to become their head coach. Could history repeat itself? Could Calgary roll in and just blow out UBC? Or is this where UBC turns their season around, Michael?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, we've seen UBC play the two Saskatchewan teams and get smoked, both by USask and by Regina. And they've got this transition right now with Tommy Yanchuk replacing Mike O'Connor, who's now with the Toronto Argonauts in the CFL. And what we got out of Calgary is what we expected out of Calgary. The alpha dog by far, in my opinion, in Can West, just rolling over their teams in the first two games. So can UBC pull off the upset? No, I'm not even gonna give them a whiff of a chance in this one. This will be a blowout.
Yeah, you know, you can't think along these lines as a college coach, but for UBC, this game needs to be about making steps in the right direction, even if they end up on the wrong side of the scoreline. They haven't been particularly close, as you mentioned, Mike, in their first two games, one at home, one on the road, and Calgary is a next level up opponent. One thing that I find really interesting to watch in this matchup, I do have some personal bias, but former Queens head coach and offensive coordinator Pat Sheehan, now the offensive coordinator at Calgary, and directly competing in this game against his former right-hand man and defensive coordinator Pat Tracy on the UBC side. It'll be interesting to see what kind of tricks Pat Tracy might have up his sleeve to try and level the playing field on that side of the ball, because I know that he very badly wants to perform against his old coworker.
When we come back, it's the Weekend Warriors and what we want to know. Hang around.
From the Similkameen Valley in British Columbia to the Western Cape of South Africa, our global network of grower partners produce the finest fruits and vegetables for Canadians. Those partners make Krown produce fresh at its best.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's our new Power 7. And yes, not very new from 1 through 5. Nothing really changes there. But look, it's the Toronto Varsity Blues. And look, it's an AUS team in 7th place. The Acadia Axemen are hot. Weekend Warriors to you, Michael.
Well, I'm going to give mine to Clark Barnes from Guelph, a transfer from the Maine Black Bears. He takes the opening kickoff of the season in week 1 and returns it 100 yards for a touchdown. Second week of the season, he takes the opening kickoff against Carleton, takes it back 106 yards for a touchdown, and he didn't get a chance to return the opening kickoff against York for a touchdown because they didn't take the opening kickoff, but In the first quarter, he did it again after his safety, an 82-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. 3 for 3 in as many weeks for Clark Barnes. He's my weekend warrior.
You know, we've talked about this guy and his team at length already in this show, but my weekend warrior is Patrice Rene of the North Carolina Tar Heels. He got himself involved this week, 4 solo tackles, 5 total coming out of the secondary. He's yet to pick one off this season, but maybe that's forthcoming for one of the senior leaders in the Tar Heels secondary as they go into another conference showdown at Wake Forest this upcoming weekend. But he balled out against the U to send the Tar Heels to 2-0, so Patrice Rene, you are my weekend warrior.
With starting quarterback Sawyer Bittner sidelined for the Ottawa GGs, they needed a miracle. Well, they got a miracle. Ben Miracle at quarterback off the bench, throwing for 290 for the GGs, putting 44 points up against the Queens Gales. That is an impressive weekend warrior effort. Triple W2K, what we want to know, and it goes to Gord.
What I want to know is, are we going to see some competition at the top of any U Sports conference this year? And in particular this week with the upcoming matchup between Laval and Montreal, I want to see if there's competition at the top of the queue or if Laval has separated itself from the pack. Montreal went through about 2.5 games worth of doldrums before really opening it up in the second half last week against McGill. So I'm interested to see if they are going to be anywhere close to the Laval Rouge et Or at this point, or if we can just about close the book on the standings in that conference as well.
What I want to know, are the Toronto Varsity Blues for real? 2-1, they have looked outstanding so far, over 1,200 yards passing. Clay Sequeira, we talked about him earlier on, has been dynamite, and they are not afraid to go deep. They throw it deep often. It's a very fun offense to watch. Talked to Greg Marshall last week for a column for OUA.ca, and he talked about his hesitancy about getting too over-optimistic because they were giving away too many big plays defensively. Only once did Laurier put up a play of over 30 yards, and it was for 30 yards. And then they gave up one big play on special teams, a block punt for a touchdown. They've got Carleton, Queens, McMaster, Guelph, and York left. Could they make a playoff run? They're going to be fun to watch. What I want to know, are they for real?
It's Mason Niehaus versus Josh Donnelly, two of the best young quarterbacks in Canada going head-to-head, Saskatchewan versus Regina. What I want to know is who wins the wheat belt at the end of the day. And just a reminder that our Gridiron Nation podcast is available on Spotify. It's available on iTunes and Google Play. But for now, this is Jim Mullen saying, let's get out to the game.